Hello and welcome to Bleeding Tree Gaming. I'm Amy, aka Warpfiend, and this is Pete with me.
And today we are not talking about Leviathan.
Yes, we're going to have plenty of Leviathan videos. I think Tammy is literally chomping at the bit to talk about it some more. But in the meantime, we thought we'd do a special little episode about the absolute legend that is John Blanche announcing his retirement from Games Workshop this week.
So maybe it is a Leviathan episode.
Yeah, good way to sneak it in the back. Well, if it is, I'm sure Tammy will pop up. So, obviously, very important part of the hobby to many people. We just want to talk briefly about some of the important parts. Maybe if you don't know who he is that much, if such a person exists in the hobby space, or if you just want to check up on his career highlights. I think that's what we're going for.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are Bleeding Tree Gaming. This is available in the places. Definitely YouTube. I don't know if we're still uploading to the podcast ones.
I should do it because no one else will.
Yes.
But we don't just do podcasts, I think. I don't know if we just do podcasts. It's warm. I can't remember what we do on purpose anymore.
Yep, lots of hobby content on the channel, so please subscribe if you could.
Oh, that.
Moving on. Right, I think for a lot of people, their introduction to John Blanche's work was either one of these two images, which would have been the second and third edition covers for 40k. And I think they're both definitely John Blanche's signature style. One of them more so than the other, perhaps. But they both kind of express something about those editions of 40k that I think is very interesting. Like the second edition one on the left here with the blood angels, you've got the primary colors, you've got the like kind of goofily rendered orcs, like everything's yellow, red, a little bit of blues and greens, compared to the third edition one where they took the more grimdark turn. And so you have like black and white, you have the very kind of red, like reds and orange and browns, kind of like a Rembrandt painting or something. It's all very gothic and over the top.
Even just looking at that second edition artwork, though, I still think it's pretty different from any of the Space Marines I've seen people do today. There's a lot more black on those blood angels.
Oh yeah, and I love these schemes. They were the kind of schemes that was like really the most popular about that time, and it was when 40k was transitioning from being a very much like adult nerd thing in the theme of like role-playing games and that, to trying to market to kids in the 90s, which they did with this box set. And for that purpose, this was one of the coolest covers ever at the time. Just like you did not know what was going on, but like you wanted to be part of that world where those kind of things could happen.
I think there were someone else pointed out that I think it was third edition where the Tau were introduced.
Was it? I thought it was somewhere around there. I'm not sure.
It was the set with Black Templar on the cover. So I think that, but speaking of being in the 90s and trying to market to kids, that was also when everything started getting pets. They started all getting their little Pokemons. The Necron warriors had scarabs, the Tau had drones, the Tyranids had Ripper swarms, and the Black Templars had neophytes.
Yeah, well, it was back in the day. You always had like the little things like the snotling bases. It was just, it came from the D&D thing where you wanted bases for like swarm enemies, basically, I think. And they were always like those larger square bases. Yeah, and so you can see for many people who grew up with the hobby back then, obviously John Blanche is the first thing you're kind of seeing, and he did these two absolutely stunning images that represent different stages of the hobby.
Was he? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I thought you were getting ready to switch slides, so I was going to do a Riker and ask you the obvious question so you can answer it.
Go for it.
Well, so was he just responsible for the box art, Amy?
Well, illustrations is the other thing, and this is a broad term I've used because, like, I think while Warner has some beautiful illustrations still nowadays, there was something a bit more handmade about the illustrations in the books back then, and John Blanche was one of the most instantly recognizable illustrations, where you get all through a codex, your rule books and stuff. There'd just be these like beautiful little sketchy illustrations where you'd get to explore different ideas about the universe, and you can see how like how the ideas from back then has really kind of defined 40k over the years. Like Abaddon, it's fairly much unchanged since that like original illustration John Blanche did. Now I don't know whether this was done after the model was made or before, but it's certainly everything we still see in Abaddon today.
The old codexes were mostly black and white, and I think the changeover has made different his art style for them, because now he do all in color. I'm sorry, I lost track of that sentence halfway through speaking.
Yeah, a lot of his stuff is done with a very limited palette, and it's like not
He's
kind
got
of
these
the
three styles here. He's got the original, I'm not maybe it's the I'm not sure what I'm doing 80s style, and then the 90s style of just jabbing a ballpoint pen into a notebook repeatedly until you get something.
Yeah.
And then it's more
the modern stuff tends to be a lot more kind of almost realistic. They're going for a kind of realism effect with it, and I think a lot of this stuff, obviously done in stuff like ink and watercolor and stuff like that on paper, was often a lot more sketchy and rough, and it just had this kind of, I don't know, like kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like just a charm to it, really.
energy, vibe, flavor.
Yeah, just a vibe. I love these squats here, even though like this is obvious. Oh, they've just taken dwarves from fantasy and put weapons on them, and that was the stage they were at developing squats at the time.
I have no idea why so many people were upset by that.
But it's such a cool image, and it just really says like a lot about, you know, that faction as it was back then. Then, of course, there's the classic portrait of the Emperor on the Golden Throne. Now, John Blanche actually did multiple of these ones. This is the most famous one that's kind of endured through, I think, and quite rightly so. It is absolutely amazing.
I think I saw it for a while before I knew it was the Emperor, and just assumed it was some generic dude on a throne, because the Emperor didn't have an eyepiece, and if the Emperor was rotted away to that extent, he would truly be dead, wouldn't he?
Yeah, there's another one I used to love. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be the Emperor, but I imagined it was, and I think it was close to the text in the second edition rulebook. It's a more kind of like sketchy, just inks and black and white one. And he's got like, he's holding up his hands, and there's like long fingernails kind of attached to cables and stuff like that. And that was just like the creepiest image. That was one of the things that really got me into 40k, like reading through the rule books.
I think I remember that one, but
Yeah.
I can't grab it off Google.
I couldn't find it when I was making these slides, so good luck. And I can't find my old second edition books. I put them in storage somewhere, but they will show up at some point. Right, moving on. I wanted to talk briefly about Amazonia Gothique and Blanche's take on women in the hobby. Not in the hobby, like women in terms of art. And just want to see, like, this was from the mid-80s, and I'm talking about the one on the left here. A piece he did as a kind of reaction against all the fantasy trope of like scantily clad women, as just this woman who's badass. She's still sexy, but she like also doesn't have to be in her underwear to do it. And this is a very, very John Blanche look. They've toned it down a bit more recently, like the ridiculous heels that no one would ever be able to walk in. But there's just something about this cool. And you can see in the middle image, another Blanche one from obviously the first Sisters of Battle Codex, how that was the look that kind of the Sisters of Battle evolved from. And you can see on the far right, we have the current model for Belladonna, the bounty hunter, in Necromunda. And again, you can see exactly where the inspiration from this piece came from.
The heels thing always, for Sisters of Battle, high heels makes sense. They're conventional humans who are put in ornate armor to go half parade and half kill everything during the parade. High heels make sense. But for the Stormcast, who didn't have bodies, who are just the soul remains of people reforged into brand new bodies.
Yeah, that's a place where it doesn't make quite so much sense. But yeah, I think it's just kind of part of the look. I don't think it's like
it's laziness.
Yeah.
Or somebody mandated
just a nice
it,
stylized
and now they
look,
can't get
and
rid of
it's
it.
very cool. But yeah, I just wanted to just kind of showcase like his particular kind of take on like badass swimming characters and how cool they are. Moving on.
Yeah.
In his later years, he's kind of been working behind the scenes a bit more, as we said. Like they won't necessarily print so much of his artwork directly in books anymore, but you can see from works like this how his simple, well, I say simple, this is incredibly complicated, but in terms of the artistic medium, it's very simply rendered, but beautifully designed, and you can see how closely the model sculptors will actually follow his work when they're designing miniatures. Yeah. And I think he's been suffering from a lot of health problems the last few years, so he's had to scale down his style. Maybe he doesn't have the time to or the energy to make the big multimedia pieces like the box arts we saw previously. But even that, like even just working in the simpler style, he's so capable of just generating these bizarre Blanchian ideas, and that's why he's a force into himself. Okay.
Not to compare the healthy lifestyle of a 40-year-old with whatever's making him retire, but just knowing how stressed out I feel when it's late at night and I want to keep working, but I can't quite put all the dots together in my head. Assuming John Blanche's health is either motor or attention span, I don't know what his health problem is, but I can't imagine how frustrating that would be to be in there. So hopefully retiring lets him focus on one or two things at a time that he'd rather get done than attend all these meetings.
But the man has obviously put out a tremendous volume of work, just an absolutely mind-boggling amount, and half of that we will probably never see because it will stay locked away in Games Workshop's headquarters. So I hope they can do something with a lot of the concept art. I'm sure they've done it on playing cards before, and that was very interesting. Right then, shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, Pete.
So my It's out of frame. Well, the bottom of the slide's out of frame, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, no. My sort of contact with John Blanche has been Blanche. I can't pronounce it the way you do.
Blanche.
What?
Blanche.
Yeah,
Blanche.
John Blanche. No, we're not. Anyway,
Oh God.
my contact with or awareness of the man really started when I moved to Nottingham around 2015. I don't think I was really aware of how much of a voice behind the scenes he was, but now looking back through it, there's this style of his work here that is really a nightmare to translate to painting, because so much of it is this outlining of things in black and then going in with shadows that you can't really do with painting. You can either put you can either do black highlights to get a cartoony look, or you can do really dark shadows to get the depth.
Yep. Well,
so I'm always amazed by the almost there. So I'm always amazed by I'm always impressed by the Blanchitsu efforts to emulate, if not the exact illustration and lines of his styles, the sort of hopeless decaying vision of people clinging to past glories that presumably weren't even theirs as the world rots and crumbles and changes around them. I did it.
Yep.
Said it. Went there.
And I think that has been in a lot inspired by his own miniatures. He's been like an avid painter and converter since like the 70s, and obviously the style of mini painting evolved from like not only his work in the actual illustrations and artworks that he's produced, but in his own mini collections, which are always something to look at.
I think just with my foolish understanding of the subject, again, correct me in the comments, and then Amy will go, I told you so. At the sort of 70s time when Games Workshop sort of started rolling with this idea of what if people paint their own toys, miniatures, war dollies, the sort of two prevailing styles would have been the sort of action figure fantasy stuff for things like D&D, and then historical reenactments and model trains and model airplane kits that were supposed to look a bit more like they'd just rolled off the shop floor. We're going for a parade. So this idea of these really worn down, high-tech, grungy science fiction things was kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of miniature players in the 70s would kind of start from military miniatures, because military wargaming and historical has obviously been around far longer than fantasy and science fiction stuff. And yeah, so it was military first, and then fantasy started coming in. That was really the tide that kind of fueled Games Workshop's initial rise. And it wasn't until like the mid 80s when you started seeing like full the 40k game as we know it. Sci-fi ranges didn't do very well till then. But obviously there were this avid like legion of fans, and John Blanche was himself like among them at that time, who were just really wanted these sci-fi miniatures.
Next.
Okay, moving on.
So I think the top left is the first thing he's created since retirement. It's I think that's some Cawdor candles and Necromunda. Well, I don't know where the pistols came from, and the body's a female Stormcast, and he called this a female Space Marine in a Polygon article or something, and it's like he did this the day he retired. He went home and made this. So
now I heard it wasn't actually female Space Marine, it was actually for some other game system, and the base of the model is from that. It's a very cool model, and I do love that his first thing when he did was like, Oh, I'm going to show you a mini I've made from another game system.
I think when Duncan first left, the next thing he posted a bunch of Napoleonic soldiers the next week or something. Like as soon as he was out of Games Workshop, he posted some Napoleonic soldiers he'd painted that week, and then it was some Star Wars Legion stuff. It's immediately the
it's just
the
a very
hoe phase,
cool
as a friend put it.
You can see like the approach is just like he says he's spending a lot less time on painting stuff now just because of necessity of his health problems, but just the lovely variations in color.
It is unlike other things. It is stained, it is rotting, it is gross, and it is alive, and it's not really clear where like one surface ends and the other, well, where one type of decay ends and the other begins.
Yeah. It's
which
just
is
really beautiful and
something
sums up his style.
which is something he was doing in the 90s, because those buildings were also made by John Blanche for Mordheim. And I think they really both of these things really get across his color choices in the more recent stuff. Maybe not always in the watercolors, but certainly in the like in the picture of the Emperor we had, I think it has that, well, in the picture of the Emperor, and then the 3 panels I found of the more modern line and staining of something that's not so much painting to show what everything's made of. It's just painting to show like how the light has stained, or how the surfaces are all stained and dingy.
Yeah. And
I'm just rambling now.
And it's just like it's not all just thrown on. There's definitely like
a
lot of just consideration that's gone into kind of like layering up all these different grimes and dirt and stuff. It's such a lovely look.
Moving on
to the next slide then.
Yeah, so the other thing to bring up is that this style has been taken and run with I want to say, to me, most prominently by Marco Frazzoni's Not Just Mecha, or his sort of star-making first video as Not Just Mecha was how he painted Blanchitsu things, and it came out like this. I guess that took the guy 45 minutes, not counting prep and cleanup, and that's kind of amazing. But also, I guess the guy's sort of moonlight job is painting action figures for toy companies. So yeah, it's good. Because it's our podcast, I thought I'd point at one that I did like 2 years ago, trying to merge both John Blanche and sort of David Lynch's styles. I'm not sure it came out. I think I have one too many colors. I don't think John Blanche uses a lot of blue or purple, so maybe that was where I went wrong.
The blues and purples do stand out, but a lot of like reds and greens and greys like that. Yeah, a lot of it really sells as Blanchitsu. Yeah.
And the 2 other variations that were showing up when I was going through pictures. One was a guy or person or group called Spyglass Asylum, who I shouldn't admit I wasn't aware of before bringing them up here. So if you're going through Google and looking for this stuff and you keep seeing Spyglass Asylum, I'd say they've really got John Blanche's color variety of everything sort of rotting and decaying and being a bit grimy. But I don't think they have the same lighting that he would do. And I think his lighting is done by the Empyrean, but the Empyrean stuff, I don't think it's all black and white, but you would think it's black and white looking at it until you get like real close. You're like, oh wait, that's not a gray, that's an off green, and that one's a bit yellow, and there's blood coming out of that vampire's mouth.
Yes.
But his stuff all looks dusty and sanitary. Like it's not made of decaying organic things, it's made of crumbling marble. And that's my whole little rant.
Lovely. Well, Yeah, there's so much more we could talk about with John Blanche. Like, I could literally keep going for another hour or two, but I think we should wrap it up there. Just want to say congratulations on your retirement and just a fantastic career that spanned so many hobbyists' lives.
And if I don't think he's listening, so there's no reason to
Oh
say.
yeah, of course. Probably like never.
If he's listening, go like make, I don't know. I don't
Just go
I don't
on
have
and
anything. I hadn't thought of
enjoy
that. I
your
don't have
hobby.
anything intelligent to say, so my
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction
Well,
is
I
to go
think
make
that
friends with
sums
Hideo
up our
Kojima or
podcast,
something.
really. We don't have anything intelligent to say. But having said that, we've been Bleeding Tree Gaming.
Good luck in all your pursuits of empty piles of shame.
Go forth and hobby merrily.
Indeed.
See you in the next one.
Bye.